For years, Sony and Michael Jackson had been tied together by one extraordinary business deal. Even after Michael's death, the partnership continued. But Sony had a right that had existed since the joint venture began. And in 2015, Sony decided to use it. Remember the arrangement? Sony owned 50% of Sony ATV. Michael's estate owned the other 50, but the agreement contained a mechanism allowing one partner to purchase the other's interest. Sony states that this right had existed since Sony and Michael created the joint venture in 1995. In September 2015, Sony exercised that right. The process had officially begun. Sony wanted full ownership of Sony ATV. Sony identifies September 2015 as the beginning of the process that culminated in the 2016 transaction. But there was something important. Michael's estate didn't simply hand over everything Michael had built. They had to negotiate the terms of the deal. And after months of negotiations, the two sides reached an agreement. On March 14, 2016, Sony and Michael Jackson's estate announced the agreement. Sony would acquire the estate's remaining 50% of Sony ATV. The total payment, $750 million. Sony announced total payments of $750 million, including approximately $733 million in lump sum payment plus previously committed distributions. Think about where this started. In 1985, Michael Jackson acquired ATV Music for a net acquisition cost of about $41.5 million. That investment eventually became the foundation of Sony ATV. Sony's 2016 announcement described the $41.5 million acquisition as the cornerstone of the Sony or ATV joint venture. Decades later, the estate was receiving $750 million for its remaining half of the company. The investment Michael made in 1985 had become one of the most remarkable music business investments in history. But here's the part that people often misunderstand. Sony wasn't buying all of Michael Jackson's music. The estate retained other major music assets that included Michael's master recordings and Mijac Music, which owns the publishing rights to songs written by Michael. Sony explicitly stated that these assets were not affected by the Sony or ATV transaction. The estate also retained its interest in EMI Music Publishing, so even after selling Sony ATV, Michael's estate still had significant interests in the music business. Sony confirmed the estate retained its EMI Music Publishing interest. And suddenly, the relationship that had started with Michael and Sony as equal partners was about to change forever. Sony would own 100% of Sony or ATV. But the deal wasn't completed yet. Regulatory approvals and other closing conditions still had to be satisfied. The March agreement was subject to closing conditions including regulatory approvals. Michael had spent decades building this catalog. He fought Sony. He partnered with Sony. His estate negotiated with Sony. And now, Sony was about to own the company outright. But one final question remained. What actually happened when the deal closed? And what did Michael's estate still own after Sony took full control of Sony or ATV? Sony won, but did it get Michael's music? Sony was about to own 100% of Sony ATV, but Michael's estate still held other major music assets. What do you think Michael would have thought about the deal? Leave your take in the comments. Next episode, the final deal, $750 million, 100 of Sony ATV, but Michael's music empire wasn't completely gone. Subscribe for part 12, the final chapter.